To play Minecraft Beta, you need a huge imagination. The world is vast, quiet, and often empty, leaving you to fill in the gaps yourself. And in my beta world, stories hide themselves around every corner. Ruins of forgotten settlements, distant structures hint at long-lost civilizations. And today, you'll witness the creation of one of those stories as I build an abandoned pirate outpost destroyed by a devastating storm and left to be reclaimed by time. With the story planned out, it was time to get to work. After one last look at my castle, I boarded onto my minecart and headed towards the coastline where I would build our pirate outpost. On the way, however, I noticed something funny and opened my inventory and saw my legs clipping through me. When I arrived at the build site, I already had a rough idea of the style I wanted to go for. I already had a small abandoned house with gravel on the inside to simulate collapsed cobblestone and mossy cobble as well. And I began by making sandstone for the first build. For the second house of this build, I started with a simple sandstone outline to define the shape of the structure before adding any sort of detail. And then from there, I began building up the collapsed wooden walls and a collapsed wooden roof to make it look like a storm had torn through it and left it partially exposed to the elements. And to push the idea of it being abandoned, I would begin to gather sand in order to fill it inside of the house. That way it looks as though that the wind blew sand into the house and it began to overtake the build. After this, I saw a spot where the watchtower could go, and, I'm not the best builder, so trying to really do this correctly was a real pain. I kept placing blocks where, it didn't really line up with the rest of it, and eventually, after some struggle, it worked out in the end. But as you can see here, I really struggled with this. Once I finished the floor, I remembered that I had mossy cobblestone in a nearby build. So, after I finished one last block, I went to the build, grabbed that mossy cobblestone, replaced it with gravel, and used it to begin to build the wall. I really wanted to remain authentic to the other watchtowers that I have built in my world, so this was kind of hard to figure out how to do the layout of the walls and make sure it looked collapsed. I put a piece of sandstone down to simulate a door, put gravel up to simulate collapsed stone, and worked my way out using a picture of one of the watchtowers that I've built in my world. And as you can see, I eventually got the grasp of actually figuring out how I wanted to build the wall, as hard as it was to do. Again, remaining faithful to my other watchtowers, I began to build up the wooden wall for it, and I wanted to simulate again that it was hit by a storm, and so I made sure that it had the cracks and all that stuff necessary. As you can see here also that I'm building log supports. Those are also on my other watchtowers. Let's make sure this line's... Uh-oh. Wait, this don't look right. It doesn't look like it's lined up like it's supposed to be. Let me fix this really quick. Okay. Now for the collapsed section of the watchtower, I wanted it to look like it had actually fallen into the sand rather than just being cut off or removed. So I started experimenting with different kinds of angles of how to do it. And originally, as you can see, I decided I wanted to try a solid watchtower build. Well, I eventually just changed my mind, mined it out, and then I started replacing that with sand to make it look as though it fell into the sand and the remaining part is just inside the sand. Once I was happy with the design, I decided to begin expanding upon the height of the watchtower. Now, I didn't want to make it look just like one solid fall. I wanted to make it look like it cracked and it opened and it didn't fall in one piece. So as I expanded, you can see that it isn't just one solid piece and that there's cracks. As you can see here, I ran out of wooden planks, so I had to make some more, and I also cut this out of the video, but I had to go gather more wood because I kept running out. It was kind of a pain in the rear, but once I figured out what I liked, I began building it. This design would later change, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Now to simulate the top part of the watchtower, I wanted to use stairs, forgetting that using an axe to mine stairs in Minecraft Beta is just a pain in the rear because it's just slow. I wanted to make it seem as though that the glass part of the watchtower was, somewhat intact, I guess. You can see here that I was messing around with the design a little bit. I eventually decided that if it fell, it wouldn't just fall in with the glass intact. So I left 2 blocks, put some stairs at the top, and called it a day. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, I ran out of wood. So I went to go gather some, mined an oak tree, then I needed more, so I got a birch tree. And as the sun began to set, I decided that enough was enough for one day. I decided to go back to my base, get some sleep. I admired what I had accomplished so far as I went by on my minecart, and watched this beautiful sunset as I went into the second day. On the second day, I realized I needed more wood and got that, and hopped on my minecart, went through my beautiful new subway system under the river, and went to get the resources that I needed to continue the build. So into my storage room, got some cactus for the outpost, got some stone, ladders, a trap door for windows. I got some wooden slabs because I wanted to change up the height of the tower instead of using blocks. Got some cobblestone, went to the furnace room to make stone, and actually now, looking in retrospect, I see that I made way too many stone blocks. But I guess I have full diamond tools, so I could just get more. So I left the furnace room to let that cook. I saw Jerry. Wait a minute. Hi, Jerry. How you doing, buddy? Anyway, went back to the build, and I realized that the blocks didn't really look as good as I thought they did. So I got rid of those, and I vowed instead that for the sides that I would use stairs. And then for the top, instead of using just full blocks, I would use wooden slabs to make it look as though that it actually collapsed into the sand. Looks a lot better that way. Actually, I got off and I was like, shoot, that looks a lot better than it did before. So I went to fix the rest of the build. And then for the part that connects to the glass, I used stairs to connect that. And then I decided at the top, instead of using stairs, which honestly looked kind of ugly, I also learned that you could use a sword to mine stairs faster for some reason. I used the slabs instead. And I thought that looked a lot better than it did before. So with that done, on to the next build. I decided that a dock would be pretty cool to add. So I began using a wooden outline similar to my other docks. So for the interior of the outline, I decided to use gravel and sand. I wanted the stone to look like it got weathered, and obviously the sand is overtaking the dock. Before night fell, I wanted to find a use for these trapdoors, so I decided I wanted to see if I could make a window out of it. And, well, easier said than done, as you can see here. See, trapdoors require a block behind it to be placed, right? Well, it opens towards that block, and well, I panicked because night was falling. So I left, ready for another day. I was going to deal with it later. What is that build? On my way back, I didn't see this chicken. This chicken made me mad, by the way, so I killed it, got back to the build, and began working on the trapdoors. Well, I found a design that made them work, and honestly, it worked out a lot better than I thought it would. So, trapdoor window. I was also trying to figure out where I wanted to put these cacti, so I began littering them around the base and making it look as though that the desert is really beginning to overtake this build. I saw this hole in the ground, and for some reason this inspired me to make an abandoned farm. So with that in mind, I began digging out where a farm would be. I put fences around it to kind of simulate that it was an enclosed space, like a regular Minecraft farm. Using the ladders that I had, I decided to build a ladder in the watchtower, kind of similar to my watchtower designs. And I realized I needed more fences for that farm, because it kind of just looked like random fences were being placed. So I made some more fences, walked my way over, and began building the extra fence. That works. I also decided I wanted a campsite, so I got netherrack, flint and steel, and I also used this opportunity to go into the furnace room and get the stone that I had made. And I realized here, I made way too much stone. After that, I used some of the cobblestone that I had to make some slabs. As I was inspired by my watchtower build, I really liked how the wooden slabs looked in that, and so I wanted to make a collapsed wall out of those cobblestone slabs. Got some more cobble, and then began to make my way back so that I could work on this campsite. The idea for this campsite is basically that people from my kingdom, as I have a castle, discovered the abandoned town, and so we began to do an investigation. So I made logs for the people to sit, and then realized that I didn't have wool to make a tent. So I went out, went to go punch sheep, and honestly, the amount of sheep that I found, kind of remarkable for my world. But anyway, I thought I had gathered enough wool to make the tent, but me being me, I didn't. So, what does one do when they don't have enough wool? They walk around and punch sheep again. So by the observatory, there were some more sheep. And then by the prison, there were more sheep. And once again, in the forest, there were more sheep. And honestly, I think this is the most amount of sheep I've ever found in my world at once. I can rarely find sheep normally. And of course, I was 1 block short. So you know what one does? Murk the sheep, and then go trek to find another one. But honestly, I kind of got distracted by this cool tree generation. But it also kind of bothered me. Why are the oak logs touching the ground? So, got rid of those, and I decided I was going to use it in a future build. On my way back, I realized that maybe more cactus would be a good idea. So I saw some cactus earlier while I was getting some sheep, and I decided that I would take it and use it for the build. After placing down the cacti, I realized that I needed to build a trading post. After all, where are the pirates going to sell their stolen goods? So, I dug holes into the ground, filled those holes with gravel to simulate eroding stone, and then wanted to use those cobblestone slabs to simulate a collapsed town hall. Well, it kinda looked awkward, so I changed my mind, mined it out, chose to put cobblestone in the ground instead to simulate a floor where the trading post used to be. Got terrified of the night, so I went to sleep and began to build the outline of the wall using cobblestone. After that, being inspired by the prison of all places, I decided to expand the wall using stone, and then I wanted to simulate a collapsed part of the wall towards the rail because I thought that would be neat, so I used the cobblestone slabs to instead simulate a collapsed wall. Honestly, it turned out pretty good. Built a doorway using the sandstone here, and then decided that there needs to be a window, so I built out a collapsed wall where the window would be. Had some trouble figuring out how to design it though, so I just mapped out, put a piece of glass, and I was like, wait a minute, that don't look right. So I began messing around with where the window would be, thinking about how I would do it in a normal build. And then I wanted to do a front desk to where you would do the actual illegal trades, so to speak. And to simulate a waiting area, I decided to make cobblestone stairs. And this is something that I had actually used in my prison build. So I went to where the waiting area would be, and I tried to place the cobblestone stairs in a way that would look like a waiting area, and then I used signs to simulate armrests, because in beta 1.6.5, you can't make corner stairs. You can imagine how much of a pain that actually was. There's this chair, I decided for it to be the only one with 2 armrests. Remembering that I had a piece of wool, I put it on the tent, I walked over to the dock, and really thought, what is a good abandoned pirate's outpost without a sunken ship? So, I began to dig out the outline for that. With the outline done, now I wanted to actually focus on building the ship. Now, I'm not the best Minecraft builder whatsoever, so trying to build this was, for me, like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube in 3 seconds. I can't do it. So I just used my head, imagined how it could look, and just really locked in. This took me at least 20 minutes to figure out. I just wanted to build a stern sticking out of the water. Remembering pictures from the Golden Age Minecraft Reddit page, I remembered that a lot of the ships they build have oak logs outlining the ship, and so I took that in mind and I used oak logs as the outline of the ship. Even though this doesn't look good underwater, as you can see it's kind of glitching, I wanted to use stairs to simulate collapsed wood, so I began to line up the front of the ship with stairs. And then on the back, I wanted to make it look like it was once saleable, and as you can tell, this is where my mediocre building skills really come into play. On the front, I decided that if it's a ship, a pirate ship, it needs a sail. So, that's what I'm building here. I wanted to simulate that the sail was ripped from the storm, so I didn't obviously build a whole sail. And then nearby, I added a flagpole, because typically on ships, there's a flagpole on the stern of the ship. So I used dark gray wool to simulate an aged flag. And honestly, for me, this is harder to build than it actually looks, I can assure you. As I did my final updates on the ship's design, it started to turn night, setting up rain, as if the world was kind of crying with me as I cried trying to figure out how to build this. But I eventually got it done, and to be honest, the final product didn't look too bad. Once daytime arrived, I decided that, well, if this is an outpost, it needs a flag. So I originally wanted to do it a really short flag, so I was going to use dark gray wool here, but I eventually decided that, hey, the pole needs to be longer, so I decided to make it look as though it was longer, it fell over, and I used a dark gray wool, mined some sand out, and built out where the flag once rested. And obviously, as you can see, the flag is pretty torn up. Content with my flagpole, I went back to the ship and decided that what pirate ship doesn't have a chest at it? So originally I wanted to put it on top of the actual stern of the ship, and then I realized that it would look a lot better if it fell underwater. That way it looks like the storm really knocked the ship over and messed it up. And honestly, that made me content. I was done with the ship. Afterwards, I decided that I wanted to build a blacksmith. After all, how do you smelt the ores that you stole? So, I began making an outline using cobblestone and cobblestone slabs. I then used oak slabs to simulate a wall that is collapsed in, and I used the remaining oak slabs to put on the floor, simulating a collapsed roof. Once I got that done, I put in a furnace to finish the blacksmith. I then realized that if there's a tent of people from my kingdom at the outpost, I need to connect that to my base. So I began to make holes for where gravel paths will eventually go. And then I used the remaining dirt to fill in the terrain a little bit, make it look a little less blocky, per se, make everything feel more connected. After getting more gravel, I witnessed a wolf decide to murder a sheep out of the blue. It was kind of sad to watch. I saw a gray sheep, and in order to spare it before it died, I grabbed its gray wool and began filling in the path, connecting my base to the outpost and the tent that is set up. Then I realized as a final added touch that having hidden treasure at the trading post would be a really good idea, so I dug out a spot where it would be behind the counter. I went back to my base, got some gold, made gold blocks, got diamonds, decided to make diamond blocks, and then I wanted aged diamonds, so I made a lapis lazuli block. And then I made my way back to the abandoned outpost, went to the trading post, I put down the gold, and then I put down the diamond, went to the ship, because obviously there needs to be treasure at the ship, put down gold, and then the aged diamond, and with that, pretty much all that was left was to do some small minor details that I had thought of in the end. So I used some of the sandstone slabs that I had left to fill in some of the houses, make things look a little more broken, and really just make things more detailed and more cracked up. I also decided to mess with the farm a little bit to add some dirt, which, you know, that kind of failed at first. I don't know what I was doing here. Oh shoot, that cactus scared me. Anyway, I was trying to figure out how to make this really work. For frick's sake! And with that, the build is finally done. And if you're interested in explanation and lore, stick around. I'm going to give a tour of the build. Okay, so with all of that, you know, jumbo out of the way of building this, I'm now going to do a tour. So, kind of just like explaining everything, really. So, here we have an old, like, what's it called? Oh my gosh, really? Like furnace, blacksmith. Oh my gosh, Jesus. So we have a good old blacksmith here. You can tell it's been a lot of the stuff here has been abandoned for a while. There's not even coal in the furnace, and this is where they would the pirates would smelt their stolen goods, their booty, if you will. We got a collapsed flag here. I figured that instead of using, you know, black wool, I think using the lighter wool the gray wool would make it look more aged. I thought that looked really cool, so I used it. Um, we got remnants of an old, like, town hall here. The pirates would come here to, report for duty, I guess, at this post here. And I guess too, like a trading post sort of. So there's like diamond and gold in here and stuff like that. All stuff that's been stolen. Obviously remnants of the wall. So you have glass. There used to be a window and it's not anymore. My crafting table, get that out of the way. Got an old shack here. It's probably one of the oldest shacks here. The point where it's got trapdoor windows. I thought this design looks really cool. I used half slabs for some bits of the wall and stuff. There's an old farm here. You can see it's overrun by cacti and stuff. There's another old home right there as well. And then I built this like campfire. I want to make it seem like as though as like our people, our kingdom discovered it. So, we're camping here and seeing what we can do with this. There's something to like build or something like that here. Old watchtower. I kind of looked at my watchtower design and I just recreated it the best I could as if it like collapsed. Basically the story is that like there's a big storm and it drove everybody out because buildings started collapsing and they couldn't afford to rebuild it. So yeah, so we got the collapsed tower. I really like the half slab design that I went with instead of using the blocks. It looks a lot smoother and nicer. Obviously glass, this would have been the top of the watchtower and it's kind of like collapsed into the ground. And then over here we got the dock, or what used to be the dock. The gravel's supposed to represent like stone, or what used to be stone. So, and then a boat. We got a collapsed boat here. You know what? I'm gonna skip to the day because you can't see. I can't see even what I'm looking at. So back in a second. Okay, we're back in the daytime. So that was annoying. Anyway, so we got an old flag. It would have flown at the back of the ship. There's a word for it. I forgot it somehow. But yeah, so this is the flag again, and I also used the gray wool instead of the black to simulate age. I am really bad at building, so to be honest, I mean this is supposed to be a ship, but like I'd have to explain that. There's a collapsed, back end of the ship and stuff. There's the sail. Use that to get the ship moving, and then over here is we got gold. The pirate's booty. It fell off when the ship succumbed to the storm, if you will. And then there's a chest right here as well. So I figured that would be cool to add as like, the pirates are coming back with treasure and the storm hit and they tragically died in this ship. Obviously the ship has been here for a while, so there's not much ruins left. And also I feel like this would have been deeper before the storm hit. So yeah, this was really fun to build. I actually really enjoyed this. It took, where are we at, an hour 33 minutes right now. So it took me about an hour and a half to get this built with all the detail and stuff. But as always, I really do enjoy building in beta Minecraft, so I don't have to complain too much, I guess. But yeah, so if you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share the video, of course, and I will see you guys next time.